The Utah Utes coaching staff has been absolutely decimated by Kyle Whittingham's move to Michigan, as Utah has lost nearly all of their offensive staff to the Wolverines.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. If it's your first time tuning into the show, make sure you like and subscribe. My name is J.T. Wistrcill, and I want to thank you all personally for making us at Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Also, huge shout out to all of you everydayers who do join us each and every day. Today's episode brought to you by Game Time. You can download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. On today's show, it's all coaching talk. We're talking about all the departures. We're talking about what Utah does from here, because for those of you that have not seen the news yet, Utah's offensive staff is nearly all heading off to Michigan. I mean, by the time this comes out, for all I know, the entire offensive staff could be gone. But what exactly am I talking about? Well, basically, Utah lost. Jason Beck is going to Michigan. Fred Whittingham, Utah's tight end coach, is going to Michigan. Micah Simon, the wide receiver coach, he's off to Michigan. Coy Detmer Jr., the QB coach, he's off to Michigan. So right now, just Jim Harding and Mark Atuaya are staying. Michigan did retain their running back coach, so hopefully that trends well towards Utah keeping Atuaya, but I'm very concerned that Utah could end up losing Jim Harding. The fact that Jim Harding didn't hit with these first initial ones is a positive, but it wasn't. Alex Markham reported of Ute Nation that it wasn't just Michigan that really wanted Jim Harding. He's a very hot commodity, which makes sense because, as we also talked about on the show before, there are very few college football teams in the country that are going to have 2 first-round draft picks from their team. There are even fewer that are going to have 2 along the offensive line, especially the tackle spots, which are arguably the second, if not the third, easily top 3 most important positions in football. What he did helping Spencer Fano and Caleb Lomu grow into the players that they are today. So it makes sense that he's wanted. But we're going to tackle this news one by one. Let's start with Jason Beck. Oh, it hurts, but I understand. I get it. Like it's one of those things, as we mentioned. It's the same thing with Kyle Whittingham leaving for Michigan, even though I know, like, hey, he stepped down and said that he would have only considered 5 head coaching jobs, which I do agree with that, and the Michigan one opens up. It's the same type of thing for Jason Beck. It's just with the way that college football is today, right? The resource game that's going on. The best way to win at the highest level is that you have the best resources, whether that's NIL, whether it's facilities, whatever. And yes, Michigan has been in a little bit of state of disarray, but at the end of the day, it's still one of the best jobs in college football. I know they lost to Texas in a down year. Michigan, to me, was still probably one of the 20 best teams in the sport. That was their 4th loss yesterday, and it wasn't super close, but they're still a really good team on the season. And they have Bryce Underwood coming back. It's a 9-3 regular season roster that does return for the Wolverines. And I think that they have a chance to have a special season next year too. And of course, Utah is losing a lot of what made them special, because you lose all your offensive line eligibility wise, and even some of the defensive pieces that you had are departing, right? A Logan Fano moving on, Lander Barton moving on. So we've talked about before on the show, it's going to be hard for Utah to have the season they had this year, 10-2 again next year. They very well could, but it's going to be tough. But yeah, losing Jason Beck, let's get back to that. This is a massive blow for this offense. I have no issues with the move. It's a Michigan job. It's one of the best in the country. And I think that he deserves this opportunity. Like, the reason Kyle Whittingham should not hire Jason Beck, because he doesn't want to hurt Utah. If you think Jason Beck's one of the best for the job, he should give that job to Jason Beck. Let's call it what it is, right? Jason Beck's probably getting a raise out of this, and he deserves it because he led one of the best offenses in college football this past season. Utah had the most rushing yards on a yards per game basis among P4 teams. A Utah offense, that a reminder, Utah had over 40 rushing touchdowns on the season. They had 7 the year before. Jason Beck came in. He transformed this offense. He's a genius. The way he uses motion is so impressive, that just totally puts defenses in a blender. There were so many times yesterday in the Nebraska Bowl, right, where linebackers are drifting over because they're following the motion and the ball's the other way too. He puts his players in position to succeed. I love that how he used the 6 offensive linemen. I think that was something that was always very smart that he did, and just something more teams should use. It's like, hey, we're going to use a fullback, but it's like, why not use a bigger and stronger fullback, just your backup offensive lineman? And that's what he would do. And the way he utilized motion, the extra offensive linemen, even his passing games, right? I felt Devin Dampier is not the most pinpoint passer in the world, right? We can call it what it is. He's a really good passer, I still think, especially with a game like yesterday, but he's not one of the 5 most accurate QBs in the country. So I thought Jason Beck did a good job of crafting a passing offense, especially post BYU, that fit his style and system, where there was some one read stuff. And credit Devin, he did make some big throws, even like yesterday might have been his best game, right? So Jason Beck just did a good job of putting his players in position to succeed, but love the versatility in the run game, whether it's pulling offensive linemen or just plowing straight ahead, all the different guys he'd use in the backfield, lining up, motion. I still remember the first play of the year. He put Wayshawn Parker in motion to throw the first block on a Smith-Snowden bubble screen. That's what Jason Beck is. He's a special offensive coordinator, and he did things with this Utah offense that honestly have almost never been done with how good. This is a top 10 offense in the country. I mean, we went from averaging about 23 points per game to, I believe, over 40. So what a year it was for Jason Beck, and Michigan's getting a great offensive coordinator. This is a great move for Kyle Whittingham. This is the right move for Kyle Whittingham at Michigan, to hire Jason Beck, who is one of the rising stars at the offensive coordinator position too. And we'll talk about the other guys that are going to go with him in a moment too. I will say, for Utah fans panicking of, does this mean we're going to lose Devin Dampier and everyone on the offensive side of the ball? I do not think that's a foregone conclusion. Some of the guys may go, right? Jason Beck, the ones he's worked with, he very well might want to bring some of the offensive stars over with him. But the benefit Utah does have is what we talked about. This is a really good Michigan roster. They were 9-3 this year. They don't have a zillion holes and things to replace, right? One of those is quarterback. Bryce Underwood is really good. And I know he wasn't outstanding in the Cheez-It Bowl, but it's Bryce Underwood. He was only a sophomore. He's one of the highest paid players in the country too. And starting as a true freshman at that position is very hard to do, especially against that level of competition. So I don't see a world where they move on from Bryce Underwood to bring in Devin Dampier or Bird Ficklin for that matter, because it's going to be the Bryce Underwood show in Michigan in 2026. And I think for Utah, you should feel good about keeping your quarterbacks right now. The only thing that concerns me with Devin Dampier, and we'll do a show on this at some point, Utah is going to hire a new offensive coordinator, obviously. So who's that going to be? And does his system support what Devin Dampier does? Because if not only Devin Dampier could leave, but I know Bird Ficklin signed his deal to return, but how does that all affected by coaching search stuff too? So lots still to happen with this Utah football team as well. You know, I'm sure we already saw John Henry Daly enter the transfer portal. We've talked about him. He could very well end up at Michigan. J.G. Buchanan was remarkable yesterday. Does he become a Wolverine? I'm concerned about that. Does Wayshawn Parker? I think Michigan has some quality backs, but Wayshawn Parker, I know, and Utah tried to get him over 1,000 yesterday, right? But he's this tremendous back too. So even like a Keith Olson was a really good backup offensive lineman for Utah, and I think I pencil him in as one of the starters. That's how good he was as a right tackle yesterday. Does that mean that he's going to go to Michigan? I don't know. A lot to be determined. Massive loss for this Utah team, losing Jason Beck. But as I mentioned, I totally get it. Kyle Whittingham should bring Jason Beck over. He did. Jason Beck was tremendous for Utah this season. He gave us an outstanding 1 year, and he's upgrading. He's at a better job. It's just a fact of the situation. In a resource sport, Michigan has better resources than Utah. I have zero issue. And I know people are like, oh, Kyle said he wanted to leave Utah in a good place. He still is. Morgan Scalley is a rising star as a head coach. I know he only had one game, but he was that good as a coordinator. I think he's going to crush it as a head coach. And a lot of Utah's defensive staff will remain, which is much better than most coaches do when they leave a school. So I still believe Kyle's leaving us in a good place. Yeah, it's a bummer to lose Jason Beck, but Beck deserves this opportunity. Unfortunately, Jason Beck's not the only one Utah's losing. There's a lot more departures on the offensive side of the staff we got to talk about in one moment. This episode of Locked On Utes is brought to us by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Fridays already feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night before the game tips off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. Friday from 6 to 7:30 Eastern have become appointment viewing with the NBA Happy Hour. Opening the FanDuel app during holiday happy hour always brings something new, boost, bonuses, and surprises. It's easy to check the weekly specials before tip-off and make a move before the window closes. So before tip-off, check out the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. And don't forget, NFL, college football still rolling on, college basketball, and NHL. FanDuel has you covered. Reports surfaced last week that Jason Beck was the target for Michigan, right? Or one of the targets, but the way it was phrased, like it was the only one, it seemed like that was going to happen. We figured with Jason Beck going to Michigan, there would be other dominoes to fall. And unfortunately, they have for the Utah Utes, as several other members of Kyle Whittingham's staff and Jason Beck's offensive staff are also on the move. Outside of Jason Beck, Fred Whittingham Jr., who coached Utah's tight ends, of course, Kyle's brother, he's on the move. Micah Simon, there was some potential. I thought maybe he would have a chance to stay. He's on the move. And Coy Detmer Jr., the QB coach, also on the move. All of them going to Michigan. Morgan Scalley said there was a plan in place, they know who was moving on. They know who they have to, who's going to stay with them. And we'll see some of the other guys, right? Because Mark Atuaya staying, is over at the offensive line side. Is Jim Harding staying? As we talked about in the first segment, I find that hard to believe, but I don't think I would say never. I wonder if Utah, and Coy Detmer Jr. is very young. I just wonder if Utah thought at all about making Detmer Jr. the OC in an attempt to try and keep things the same. Now, I do think Utah offensive coordinator pays more than Michigan QB coach. I don't know that for a fact, but I wonder if Utah kicked that around. But there's also been noise and rumblings about certain candidates that Utah might try to go after for the offensive coordinator position that I think if they could get them, I think it makes sense why you wouldn't want to promote a Coy Detmer Jr. too early, because really the reason you give him the job is just to try and keep things the same. But obviously Beck's been calling the plays, and Detmer Jr. doesn't have a lot of experience. Really, I don't know if he has any doing that. So that would have been the only reason, is just bring him in to try and keep things the same, to make sure some of these guys stay. But obviously Utah feels good about, and as Morgan Scalley said, there's a plan in place. So let's talk a little bit more about what Utah is losing. First, let's start with Fred Whittingham Jr., who is the longest tenured of this group. Fred Whittingham Jr., a guy who's helped this Utah tight end room tremendously, right? I think about whether it's the Dalton Kincaids, who's now making plays in the NFL. If he could just stay healthy, he'd be a star in the NFL too. But the memories and moments we got with Dalton Kincaid, Brant Keithy, some of the best tight ends to ever play at the University of Utah came under the tutelage of Fred Whittingham Jr. He did a great job with that position, whether it was just recruiting the guys in or helping them grow and develop too. A reminder, Brant Keithy, Dalton Kincaid were by no means superstars when they stepped on campus. Dalton Kincaid started his career at San Diego. I believe Keithy, or it was San Diego State or just San Diego, either way. I believe Keithy was a 2-star recruit when he arrived on campus too, and both of them arguably could be in the Utah Hall of Fame someday because they were that good, led this Utah team in receiving yards so many times. In an era where Utah's wide receivers, as often was the case under Kyle Whittingham, struggled to stand out, those two were tremendous. Keithy as well as Kincaid, and they came here in part because of Fred Whittingham Jr., right? It's not just that. It's a Thomas Yasmin when he could stay healthy, unfortunately battled injuries. The job he did developing Caleb Lohner to be ready to rock and roll and play last season. And this year, right? How about Dallin Bentley? That's probably one of the most underrated jobs he and this Utah staff did. Dallin Bentley I think he had under 100 receiving yards last season, and he's now over 600 yards on the year. Dallin Bentley, the Snow College Badger, a developmental project that Fred did a good job working with. He did a really nice job with this tight end room, and he'll be missed because he did a really good job there. Helped Utah on the recruiting front as well, too. Another staple of the Kyle Whittingham era, but not surprised at all to see him go off to Michigan and have this opportunity with the Wolverines, where, as we mentioned, Michigan and Utah are not the same when it comes to resources. I assume all of these guys are going to be getting raises. So it sucks to see Fred Whittingham Jr. leave, but totally get it for him. And I have no ill will towards any of these guys for the same reason we talked about in the last segment. It's Michigan. It's just a fact. It's a better program. It's a better chance to win a national championship. And Kyle Whittingham is trying to build the best staff he can while also giving these guys raises and an opportunity to do that. How can I be mad? I hope Utah gets to the point where they can win national championships. It's also just call a spade, y'all. They've never been close to a national championship. The closest they got was to being a college football playoff team probably in 2019. It was just a 4-team format. But then you go and get spanked by Oregon. And I know there was an injury or two, but therefore you're not that close if you get spanked in the game to being a national championship contender. So Utah just hasn't been that. I want them to be that, but I get this move to Michigan for Fred Whittingham Jr. As we mentioned, not the only one. Quick cup of tea in Utah, basically just 1 year for these next two guys. First, Micah Simon, the wide receiver coach, is on the move. It was reported that Utah is keeping their running back coach. So like we said, we knew Mark Atuaya would end up staying, but then it was a question of like, okay, with Tony Alford staying, he's running backs, but who else on that the position staff might stay? Well, Jason Beck likes Micah Simon, so he wanted to after what they've done this year. And Kyle did too, clearly. So he wanted him to come over. Even though the Utah wide receivers did not have an outstanding season, I still felt like he did a good job with this Utah wide receiver core. Ryan Davis clearly got better from last year, this year, getting 700 yards at New Mexico. And then I think with this game yesterday, he was over 700 yards now at Utah. But had he not gotten hurt and missed a couple of those last games, he easily would have had more yards at the P4 level than he did at the G5 level, signifying a clear growth in his game too, right? So he popped off. I thought he did a good job too, bringing in guys with high ceiling potential, low floor as well probably, but Larry Simmons, Tobias Merriweather. Tobias Merriweather didn't pan out, but that was a good get for this Utah team at the time. And Larry Simmons got better as the year wore on too. So that's an area I look at and I go, okay, there was some growth there. There was some potential there. Darren Zipper, we heard he was having a really good camp. I felt like he would have had a good season too. So yeah, this is a bummer to lose Simon as well, because I felt like he was building something cool there. I think Utah will be fine at the wide receiver. I think they can find another. I think Utah could be fine at all these positions. Like some of them, Fred Whittingham Jr., what he's done at tight ends, that'll probably be a little tougher to replace too, right? But I do think there's a lot of just really good quality position coaches in the country. I think the harder part is finding an elite play caller like Jason Beck. Not to say it won't be hard to find good position coaches. It still can be, but I just believe they come in more of a quantity. So Micah Simon did a good job with this Utah wide receiver room. He'll be missed. As is the case with Fred Whittingham Jr., by the way. What'll be interesting to also see is how many of these guys that coached for him end up leaving, right? J.J. Buchanan, kind of a tight end wide receiver hybrid, but either way, both wide receiver and tight end coaches now at Michigan. So will Buchanan be on the move? I don't see any Utah wide receiver with their lack of production this year being involved in Michigan's passing attack, but we'll wait and see what happens there. So Micah Simon on the move. Coy Detmer Jr. on the go. I don't know if you guys saw yesterday after Dampier, I think it was his first touchdown when he stuck it out over the goal line in epic fashion. Coy Detmer Jr., I'm pretty sure it was him smashed his head against Devin Dampier's helmet. So just a football guy who loves ball. He had some great tweets after the game. Like yesterday, I think he tweeted out a fourth grade photo of Devin Dampier. Basically just being this guy's been a baller. It was just a funny photo. Coy Detmer Jr. did a good job with these QBs. He helped Bird, I feel like, tremendously grow throughout the season, along with Jason Beck. Devin Dampier experienced growth as well. A reminder, Devin Dampier threw 12 picks last year. I think he threw 5 this year and well over 30 touchdowns on the season now. Came into yesterday with 29, had over 100 yards rushing, Dampier did. Utah has to find a way to keep Devin Dampier. That'll be my lead on tomorrow's show, barring more portal news breaking, because I want to talk about how badly I want Devin Dampier back in this offense, and all of you guys should too, and I expect to feel the same way. But yep, lots of losses for this Utah coaching staff, and they could not be done. Like we mentioned, I feel like a lot of the defensive staff is going to stay with Morgan Scalley. They seem like they are. They're going to stay loyal. Witt, obviously, all the reports are that he's targeting Jay Hill, and they're working to hire Jay Hill. So I expect a lot of that BYU defensive staff to be on the move up there. But a lot to shake out and see what happens still. But nonetheless, grateful for all these coaches, whether it is Jason Beck, Micah Simons, whether it's a guy who did a great job in Coy Detmer Jr., Fred Whittingham Jr. has been here a long time. All of those guys excelled with this Utah program, whether it was for 1 year or for many years. They will be missed, and grateful for what they did for this program. But what happens now? Who else might leave, and where does Morgan Scalley go from here? That's what we're going to discuss momentarily. This episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. There's nothing like the college football season. The tailgates, packed stadiums, and being right there in the middle of the action. And it's all the same during bowl season. But the most frustrating part can be those prices jumping and just all the issues trying to buy tickets. But that's why I use Game Time. It truly gives the advantage when it comes to buying tickets back to fans. It's the easiest way to unlock amazing college football tickets and experiences in just a few taps. I opened the Game Time app, looked at an upcoming college football game, and was surprised at how fast it was and easy it was to find great seats. I would love being able to see the view from my seat before buying, so I know exactly what I'm getting. They give you a panoramic view from your seat that I absolutely love. Also, how about those zone deals? They stood out. You pick the section, Game Time picks the seats, and you save big. I'm talking about college football tickets as low as $25. Makes planning a game day trip easy. Take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, all caps, no spaces, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. So the Utah offensive staff is on the move. I'm going to try and refresh Twitter here right now while I'm recording this to make sure no one else ends up leaving too. Alex Markham is reporting of Ute Nation with the confirmed news of Jason Beck to Michigan. From all of my conversations, I continue to expect that all the Utah offensive coaches will go to Michigan with the exception of Mark Atuaya. So based on that report, Alex does expect, obviously, that Jim Harding will be on the move to the Wolverines as well, which, as we mentioned, is not surprising with what he was able to do. And also, if Jason Beck does end up going to, if Jim Harding ends up going too, Alex Markham of Ute Nation is also reporting that Isaac Asiata, who's the assistant offensive line coach, he's not going to become the next offensive line coach at Utah because he's told, this comes to us from Alex Markham once again of Ute Nation on X, I'm told to anticipate that Utah great and assistant offensive line coach Isaac Asiata will become the next offensive line coach at Weber State. Weber State, of course, just hired Eric Kerr in big news there. Eric Kerr, of course, the longtime Corner Canyon High School coach who did a tremendous job there. So Utah will lose Isaac Asiata as well. So probably a completely new look offensive line for this Utah team too, because as we mentioned, like he expects that Utah will be losing all of the offensive staff with the exception of Mark Atuaya, which I do love that because I'd love to have Wayshawn Parker was tremendous this year. Daniel Bray was outstanding too. Love to have both those guys back too. Nate Johnson is an athlete as well. I feel like has some potential in this offense still. So want to continue to see Wayshawn especially. I think he's one of the 15, maybe 20 to 15 best backs in college football. The home run hitting ability, the speed, the shiftiness is there too, the strength. He's a passing game threat too. He had that great catch down the field yesterday. We're having Devin Dampira playing backyard football. So would love for him to stay. Also, Mark Atuaya is just a great culture fit for any team he's on. I think we all saw the video of him hyping up the crowd at the Las Vegas Bowl pep rally. So glad that he's expected to stay as well too with the news that Michigan, like we already talked about, they are going to be keeping that tight end coach Detmer. Or excuse me, not Detmer, but I'm just blanking on the guy's name. But they are keeping their running back coach. So with him staying, does sound like Atuaya is going to stay. But based on Markham's report, he does expect Jim Harding to move on, which would be a huge loss for Utah because Jim Harding has done great work with the O Block, and he will be incredibly missed. So going to be interesting to see where Utah pivots and tries to find an offensive line coach and all these coaches because they're losing a lot. But like we mentioned, I have an issue with Kyle Whittingham doing this because he's building the best staff he can at Utah, and he's still leaving Utah in a good place because he's leaving them with a great head coach in waiting candidate. Morgan Scalley, like to me, when Lane Kiffin even left LSU, right? Like Morgan Scalley is a much better coordinator and has been and a much better head coach than Pete Golding. Golding got the job basically because he was just there and Kiffin left and they're just like, well, we want to try and capitalize on this. So let's promote within, but there's not a sustained history of excellence at that school for Pete Golding. There's a sustained history of excellence for Morgan Scalley at Utah. So I do think that Morgan is going to do a tremendous job at Utah. And he said there was a plan in place. Utah knew they were going to get hit hard. And I think Utah will pivot. And I'm excited to see how they build out the rest of this offensive staff. But it's unfortunate that it is going to be a very new look and different probably Utah offense next year. Hopefully some of the key pieces are back. I don't expect – last year we brought in, 20-plus players in the portal? Could very well be the same number again because you're going to lose – a lot offensively. We already knew a lot of the running backs were on the move, and the ones who will stay because Mark Atuaya is there, right? And hopefully those guys will stay. But you also just never know. Some of those guys, Wayshawn, may want another job at the P4 level. We'll see how all that shakes out. But I trust that Morgan has a plan in place. It's unfortunate that Utah is losing as much as they are on the offensive side of the ball, but Morgan Scalley aced his first test as the Utah Utes head coach, had this team ready to rock and roll, and they pulverized the Cornhuskers yesterday. And I think he's going to do a good job formalizing and just putting together a staff overall. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he's going to do. But the reports came in, and here we go. So BYU defensive coordinator, just since I started recording, has agreed to officially become Michigan's defensive coordinator. He's been Kyle Whittingham's target forever. So there we go. So as we just talked about a little bit, right? What does that mean? That Utah. So when we're talking about this Utah team, the defensive side of the ball should not be harmed too much for Utah, if at all. I think all these guys are loyal to Morgan Scalley, and I also think that this is where when Kyle talked about wanting to leave Utah in a good place, he wasn't just going to bring everyone from the defensive side of the ball over too. So now what happens is that we see this Utah team has to replace everyone on offense, but they don't have to replace the defensive side because Jay Hill is officially Michigan's next defensive coordinator, which means that most of the defensive side of Utah should stay intact. We'll see if that's how it shakes out, but that's how it's looking as we sit here today. So that's a positive update for this Utah team, but so much chaos happening for Utah football. So Jay Hill on the move. Kyle Whittingham is quickly building his staff at Michigan too. They'll be active in the transfer portal. He was quoted today on College Game Day saying the hire of Jason Beck was huge for us. He added it's going to be a big plus having him there in Ann Arbor, and it will be because he is absolutely a tremendous coach too. So what a day. What a day for this Utah team. Life comes at you fast, right? You win a big bowl game, and then boom, your entire offensive staff is gone. Pretty much. Except for your running back coach. Shout out to Mark Otuayo. He's going to keep the vibes high, and I hope he's able to stay at Utah and not go somewhere else. Because if everyone else leaves, he could decide to go too on his own. Doesn't sound like that's what Alex Markham's reporting. He sounds like he's reporting he should stay, but he's reporting that he's the only one not going to Michigan basically right now. So, yeah, wild times in Salt Lake City. But there's a lot of chaos to happen. It's the start of a new year. Happy New Year, everyone. And it's going to be a new look for Utah football in 2026. So I believe that's all the breaking news right now. If there's anything else that resurfaces, I'll try to go live later and talk about it. But yeah, keep your phone on, keep your notifications on, because literally just since I hit record on this podcast, we saw the news become official that Jay Hill's gone to be the DC at Michigan. So lots of fallout happening at the team down south with that, which we mentioned. It's good for Utah that there's chaos at BYU too. As we're losing a lot, it's also nice that our rival could be losing a little bit too, and both teams might have to retool and could potentially take a step back next year. But it's going to be a wild offseason for the Utah Utes, so make sure you guys do subscribe to Locked On Utes. We'll keep you coming constantly with content, talking about all the latest coaching changes. Transfer portal opens tomorrow. Utah needs to do everything they can to keep some key guys. That's what I'm hoping the focus of my show is tomorrow, but depending on what other coaching departures and coaching hires happen, we'll have to talk about that. We'll see how quickly Morgan Scalley moves, hiring his next offensive coordinator. He said he has a plan in place. I'm excited to see it play out that way. That's going to do it for Locked On Utes. Happy New Year once again. Thank you all for making Locked On Utes first listen to view of the day, or just listening to the show in general. I greatly appreciate it. That's going to do it for us here, and we'll be back tomorrow talking about all the chaos and calamity happening up with Utah football right now.